The ice shackles of betrayal. The wind clawed at the cabin walls, howling like a hungry beast. Snow fell in relentless waves, covering the prairie in a thick white shroud. Inside, Eleanor Whitford sat still, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her shawl was wrapped snug around her shoulders, but it did little to keep the chill from seeping into her bones. She hadn't spoken in hours, not since Jonathan had slammed the door that morning and stormed off toward town. Again, the fire in the hearth crackled with a sullen energy. It hadn't been tended well, and she lacked the strength to do more than feed it dry sticks. Her once bright hazel eyes were dulled now, the sparkle long gone, replaced by the glassy glaze of endurance. A gust rattled the window. Eleanor turned her head slightly, staring past the frost-kissed glass to the gray expanse beyond. Somewhere in that swirling white abyss, her husband walked freely, while she remained here, waiting. Waiting had become a way of life. When they'd married 6 years ago, she'd believed in Jonathan Whitford. Tall, rugged, ambitious, everything a settler woman could want. He spoke sweet words, painted dreams of rich farmland and quiet evenings with children playing near the hearth. But land, she learned, was all he ever truly loved. And lately, someone else. She found the letter 2 days ago, tucked into his coat. May, it began, written in delicate handwriting. A woman's voice, eager and breathless. She wrote of their nights together, of secret rendezvous in the barn behind the tavern. She signed it with a kiss. Eleanor hadn't confronted him then. What would it have changed? He'd only deny it, or wise. But today, when he returned smelling of perfume and ale, stumbling through the door with bloodshot eyes and a mouth full of venom, she couldn't hold back. You reek of another woman, she had said quietly, not with anger, but with exhausted truth. Jonathan's expression twisted, his drunken haze flaring into rage. You ungrateful snake, he spat. You've done nothing but drag me down since we came out here. I should have left you in Ohio. She didn't flinch. Then why didn't you? The slap came fast, hard, open-palmed, across her cheek. She stumbled backward, catching herself on the kitchen table. The lantern rocked dangerously. She felt the sting, not just on her skin but in the deepest part of her chest. Still, she remained silent. That silence enraged him more. Minutes later, she found herself dragged outside by her wrist. He hauled her through the snow like a sack of grain, ignoring her weak protests. At the edge of their clearing stood a crooked old pine, its trunk scarred by lightning and time. From his belt, he unhooked a short iron chain, meant to bind livestock or hold hunting gear. Without a word, he wrapped it around her waist and snapped the lock shut. Cool off out here, he growled, his breath misting in the cold. Maybe next time you'll learn to hold your tongue. And then he was gone. She'd called after him at first, but her voice barely carried in the wind. That had been an hour ago, too. The sky had dimmed. Snowflakes danced in wild patterns as the storm thickened. Her hands were numb. Her lips trembled with every exhale. She tucked her chin into her collar, trying to conserve heat. Her feet were already disappearing under the snow. How many women had dreamed of a quiet life on the frontier, only to find themselves buried by it? Her mind wandered through memories. Jonathan kissing her cheek in candlelight. Their wedding vows. The first time he promised her children. All lies, it seemed. Or, if not lies, then dreams worn thin by time and disappointment. Her breath slowed. Her shoulders sagged. Was this it? Would she be found in spring, a frozen monument to betrayal? A soft crunch echoed nearby, snow underfoot. She blinked, trying to focus through the blur. Her vision had begun to play tricks. Was that a shadow between the trees? Something moving? Her heart tried to quicken, but her body was sluggish now. The cold had burrowed too deep. The figure moved closer. Not Jonathan. Too tall, too careful. Broad shoulders wrapped in fur. Long hair catching snowflakes like a veil. A stranger. She wanted to speak, to call out. Only a whisper came. Help. Then, nothing. Darkness wrapped around her like the storm itself. Quiet, absolute. Flames in the snow. Chaska moved like a shadow through the snow, each step deliberate and silent. His fur-lined moccasins barely left a trace behind. He had been following a distant set of boot prints, fresh, careless, cutting a harsh line from the ridge down into the clearing. Something about them unsettled him. Too purposeful, too alone. He didn't often venture this close to settle a land. But instinct had stirred in his chest, quiet and insistent. Then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a broken scarecrow swaying in the snow. A bundle of cloth, unmoving against the old pine. But then he caught a shimmer of hair. A pale face. A figure slumped low, chained at the waist. Chaska's breath caught. A woman. Alive? He approached slowly, one hand resting near his belt knife. No traps, no ambush. Just her, barely conscious, cheeks flushed red with cold, lips cracked and trembling. Snow clung to her lashes like frost. He crouched beside her, brushing snow from her face. Her eyes flickered open, dull brown, dulled more by pain. She tried to speak, but her throat gave only a rasp. "Help!" she mouthed again, and then slumped forward. Chaska glanced at the chain. Rusted, wrapped cruelly around her middle and locked tight to the tree. She was no prisoner of war. This was not justice. This was punishment. He set down his satchel and retrieved a small hand axe. In 3 sharp swings, the chain cracked apart. Her body slumped into his arms like wet cloth. She was burning with fever despite the cold. Skin hot, breath shallow. He muttered a quiet Lakota prayer and lifted her easily, cradling her like a child. The fire in his winter shelter crackled to life by dusk. Built beneath a rocky overhang near the tree line, the hide tent was small but warm. Chaska laid her on a bed of soft pelts, covering her with his spare buffalo robe. Her breathing was faint but steady now. He mixed crushed pine needles and dried willow bark into boiling water, medicine for fever. Dabbing her forehead gently, he studied her face. The bruise on her cheek, the red line on her wrist where the chain had chafed. The pain there wasn't fresh. It had been building for some time. Settle a woman or not, she'd been left to die like an animal. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. She stirred once in the night, eyes fluttering open. "Where?" she whispered. "You are safe," Chaska said softly, in careful English. Her eyes darted around the tent. Fear flickered across her face. Who are you?" "My name is Chaska." She blinked, her mind struggling to catch up. "You found me." "Yes." He ladled some broth into a wooden bowl. "You were nearly gone." She reached weakly for it, hands trembling. He held it to her lips, letting her sip slowly. Steam curled around her face as color began to return to her cheeks. "Why did you help me?" she asked between sips. Chaska shrugged lightly. "Because you needed help." A silence stretched between them. Eleanor searched his face. Strong features, long black hair tied with a leather cord, dark eyes full of calm. He didn't look at her like a threat. He didn't look at her like a burden. She was used to both. "I'm Eleanor," she said, voice hoarse. He nodded. "Eleanor," he repeated, tasting the name. It made her smile faintly. "You saved my life," she whispered. Chaska dipped his head. "It was not time for your spirit to leave. That's all." She wanted to speak more, to explain how she'd ended up there, chained to a tree in the middle of a storm like some wild dog. But exhaustion pulled her back down into sleep. Chaska sat beside the fire, listening to the wind outside. The storm still raged, but inside the shelter, warmth returned. He watched her carefully, noting each breath, each movement. He didn't know her story. He didn't know the man who left her to die, but something told him he would. By morning, Eleanor awoke to the smell of pine smoke and stew. Her fever had broken. Her limbs still ached, but she was alive, more alive than she'd felt in weeks. Outside, the storm had passed. The sky, though cold, was clear. She looked over at Chaska. He was sharpening a blade, quiet and focused. A warrior, yes, but not a violent man. Their eyes met. "Thank you," she said. Chaska gave a soft nod, then turned back to his work. There was much she didn't understand. About him, about why he'd helped her, and about what came next. But something told her this was no longer the end of her story. It was the beginning. Shadows of the heart. The days passed in quiet rhythm. Snow melted reluctantly under the pale sun, and Eleanor found herself moving more easily with each sunrise. Her fingers no longer tingled from frostbite, and color had returned to her cheeks. She spent her mornings collecting kindling with stiff fingers, her afternoons helping Chaska prepare food and mend the shelter. Small things, but they gave her purpose. Chaska remained a man of few words. Yet in silence, he spoke volumes. He showed her which plants eased pain, how to read tracks in the snow, how to coax warmth from nearly dead embers. His presence was steady, never looming. When she struggled to sleep at night, haunted by memories of Jonathan's threats or the bitter cold of that tree, he would simply add more wood to the fire, sit close enough for her to feel his nearness, and let her know she was not alone. And Eleanor found herself watching him more than she meant to. She admired the way he moved with confidence, unhurried yet purposeful. His hands were scarred and rough, yet careful when preparing meals or weaving rope. He never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer, but when she did speak, he listened, truly listened, with eyes that held no judgment. One afternoon, as snowflakes drifted lazily through bare branches, Eleanor finally found the courage to tell him. "My husband," she began, "wasn't always cruel. Or maybe he was, and I just refused to see it." Chaska looked up from the fishing net he was mending. His expression remained calm, but she sensed he was listening. "He married me for money, or at least what he thought I had. My father died just after we settled the land. The inheritance vanished with the last crop. And Jonathan, he changed. Or maybe that was the real him all along." She paused, her eyes scanning the horizon, though she wasn't seeing the snow. "He had someone else. May, a girl from the town. I found her letters. I don't know if she knew about me. I'm not sure it mattered." Chaska let the silence linger a while before responding. "You loved him." She nodded slowly. "I did. Even after he hit me the first time. I believed it was my fault. That I'd failed him. Failed the life we dreamed of." "Dreams," Chaska said, his voice low and distant, "can blind us. Even warriors follow ghosts if the pain is strong enough." Eleanor tilted her head. "You lost someone, too." His jaw tightened slightly. For a moment, she thought he might retreat, as he often did when she asked something personal. But then he spoke, his words measured. "My wife. My daughter. 3 winters ago. A fever took them before sunrise. The settlers burned our village weeks later. Nothing was left to bury." Her breath caught. "I'm sorry." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The pain in his voice, the weight in his shoulders, it told her everything. They sat in silence again, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was shared, a fragile bridge between 2 broken pasts. That evening, as they sat around the fire, Eleanor handed him a wool scarf she'd mended from her torn cloak. "It's not much," she said, "but the wind seems crueler to you than to me lately." Chaska accepted it with a quiet nod, wrapping it once around his neck. "Thank you," he said, with a flicker of a smile. Their hands brushed, just for a moment, but it sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the flames. Later that night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay on her bedroll, staring at the tense ceiling, heart heavy with confusion. She had known Chaska for barely over a week. He was not hers. He had his own pain, his own history. And yet, in his quiet care, she had felt more seen, more valued than in years of marriage. It frightened her. She rose quietly and stepped outside into the snow. The moon hung low, casting a silver glow across the clearing. Chaska stood a few paces away, watching the stars. He turned as she approached. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Too many thoughts." Chaska nodded. "The stars help me think. Or forget." Eleanor stepped beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but not touching. "What do you see up there?" she asked. He pointed. "That one, Joaquinian, the thunder spirit, protector of the weak. My mother said he watches over those who've been broken until they learn to walk again." Eleanor followed his gaze. "Then maybe he's watching both of us." Chaska turned toward her then, eyes soft. "Maybe," he said. They stood beneath the stars, silent and still. But in that moment, something fragile had begun to heal. Thor of the spirit. The ice began to break in April, not with a sudden crack, but slowly, almost shyly. The snow softened beneath the morning sun, puddling around the roots of trees. Birdsong returned in quiet bursts, like hesitant greetings after a long silence. Eleanor felt the change in her bones before she saw it. She moved more freely, walked farther each day. Her muscles no longer ached from cold or fear. There was breath in her chest again, steady, unshaken. She had stopped counting the days since Chaska found her. The calendar no longer mattered. What mattered was the present, the warmth of firelight, the small smile Chaska gave when she spoke, the silence they shared without needing to explain it. But she hadn't forgotten Jonathan, and she couldn't stay in hiding forever. That morning, as she braided her hair and laced her boots, she said softly, "I have to go back." Chaska, crouched by the fire, looked up slowly. "To town," she added. "I need to see him. Not to beg, not to fight, but to end it." His brow furrowed. "You are not safe with him." "I'm not going back to him," she said, firm. "But I need to face him, look him in the eyes, and leave on my own terms. Not as a victim, not as someone left in the snow." Chaska didn't respond immediately. He stirred the coals with a stick, the flames whispering between them. Finally, he stood. "I will go with you." She exhaled. Not relief, exactly, but something close. They rode borrowed horses into the outer edge of the settlement by late afternoon. The building seemed smaller than Eleanor remembered, worn down by wind and time. She hadn't been here since before the betrayal, before the letter, the slap, the chain. They dismounted near the blacksmith's. Chaska stood back as she crossed the dusty road, boots crunching on gravel. Her heart beat hard, but her steps didn't falter. The saloon door creaked open under her hand. Heat, smoke, and laughter spilled out. Jonathan was inside. She spotted him immediately, half drunk, slouched at a corner table with a glass in one hand and May in the other. He looked older, bloated from liquor, the spark in his eyes dulled by rot. May saw Eleanor first. Her eyes widened in shock, mouth parting. Jonathan turned, following her gaze. His face went pale. "Well, look who the wolves forgot to eat," he muttered, straightening in his chair. "Thought you were dead." Eleanor walked forward slowly. No anger in her stride, only purpose. "I nearly was," she said. "You saw to that." He sneered. "You were hysterical. I was trying to help you calm down." She didn't raise her voice. "You chained me to a tree." May's hand slipped from his. "You have no proof," Jonathan scoffed. "No one would believe you." Eleanor took another step. "I'm not here to make anyone believe me. I'm here to tell you, I'm not afraid of you anymore." Jonathan stood, wobbling slightly. "What do you want?" "Nothing," she said. "Not your land. Not your name. Not your lies." She turned and walked out. He didn't follow. Outside, Chaska waited with the horses. When she reached him, she felt a strange lightness settle into her chest, like she had finally exhaled after months underwater. "It's done," she said. Chaska offered his hand. She took it without hesitation. Weeks passed. The snow melted into green. Trees budded, and wildflowers rose like small flames from the ground. Eleanor and Chaska built a modest cabin near the riverbank, far enough from town, yet close enough to the markets for supplies. They lived simply and well. She taught him to read from a tattered prayer book she'd salvaged from her father's things. He taught her how to trap rabbits and make birch tea. They laughed more, spoke more, still had silences, but now they were warm, not wounded. One morning, Chaska brought her a gift, a small carved bird, no larger than her palm. She turned it over in her hands. The wings were open, in flight. "We're happy," he said. "Starbird. They say it carries broken spirits to freedom." Eleanor smiled, tears rising unbidden. "I don't feel broken anymore." Chaska's eyes held hers. "That is because you are not." She stepped forward, heart steady, voice soft. "You found me when I was lost. I don't know how to thank you." He placed a hand over Hayes, closing her fingers around the carved bird. "Then don't. Just stay." There was no need for more words. They stood at the threshold of the cabin they had built, the prairie alive around them. Two lives once shattered, now whole, not because they had been saved, but because they had chosen to heal. Together.